Welcome to Financial Clarity, the podcast dedicated to helping service-based small business owners achieve financial success. Join us as we demystify financial concepts, get practical tips from seasoned entrepreneurs, and discover strategies to increase profit and value. Hannah Smolinski here. I'm the host of the Financial Clarity podcast, where I connect successful entrepreneurs, financial experts, and leaders in the small business community. Past guests include Samantha Irwin, a consultant who uses her hospitality and teaching background to help businesses understand and curate their customers' experience, and Greg Crabtree, the author of Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits, which is my favorite financial book to recommend to small business owners. So if either of those episodes sound interesting, please make sure to go check those out on your favorite podcast app. Today's episode is brought to you by my company, Clara CFO Group. Clara CFO is dedicated to providing financial clarity and profit maximizing solutions to small businesses. The team at Clara CFO are seasoned accounting professionals with a heart for small business. We help growth-minded entrepreneurs thrive through fractional CFO services and financial education. To learn more about Clara CFO Group and how we can help your business, visit claracfo.com. So I met today's guest so long ago now, or at least it feels like it's a long time ago in our entrepreneurial journeys. I feel like it has been a couple years. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years now.
Oh, at least 5. I think it was 2018, maybe even earlier than that. Yes.
So I met Casey Gromer through the Biz Chicks Network. I was able to meet her in person through the Biz Chicks Live event, and that was hosted by Natalie Ekdahl, and Natalie has been on the podcast. She was on a couple months ago. So you can check out everything that Natalie has going on now by going to bizchicks.com. Really thankful for the community that she has fostered through the years. Casey is the host of Female Founders Breaking Boundaries podcast, where she encourages women to ditch traditional male-dominated business advice in favor of more realistic, workable ways of running their businesses while achieving success. As the founder of C-Suite Boutique, Casey currently serves women entrepreneurs in an advisory role. Under her leadership, clients have scaled their businesses while working less and spending more time doing the things they love. Casey, thank you so much for being here.
I am excited. And for any of your listeners who love to stalk you like I do, you have been on my podcast as well. And that is one of my most downloaded episodes. So I'm not sure if you have an opportunity to put it in the show notes, but it was an awesome episode.
We can definitely do that. We talked about like helping protect yourself in divorce.
Yes.
Right. During that. Is that the episode that we?
Yes. And there's actually, so you've been on my podcast twice then.
Oh, yes. Right.
Yes. So one, we talked just straight finance, which everyone really loved what you had to say. And then we did talk about divorce, which was also a very popular episode. So,
well, I think money and relationships are always always garner some attention. I think people want to talk about those maybe more so than they do sometimes. So
absolutely.
Well, Casey, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, and as brief or as long as you would like, but maybe mostly how you got to running your own business, how you started C-Suite Boutique?
Well, like many people who start their own business, I'm a corporate dropout. So when I realized that the life I was living was not conducive to the schedule I was keeping in corporate, I kind of had no other choice. And I left corporate, and my first foray into owning my own business was as a fractional CMO, because I have a master's degree and 20 some years in marketing. So it made sense. And then as you know, as with a lot of new entrepreneurs, over a couple of years of experimenting, I realized that what people were looking for and needing in a fractional CMO, and then who I was actually serving, was not in alignment. And so I morphed into what I'm doing now, which is a fractional integrator. And for those of you who don't know what a fractional integrator is, it's basically your chief operating officer or your chief of staff, your second in command. I don't care what you want to call us, but as an entrepreneur, it's the person who's going to help you get your stuff done. So they're going to execute the business plan. They're going to manage your people. They're going to make sure you're making a profit. They're going to help you with your strategic decision making. And that's me. And that's what I'm doing now.
Yeah, that's great. So I guess the integrator role and director of operations, you're saying that it's a similar
It's
thing.
similar, and I'm really glad you brought that up. I actually have a few episodes on the podcast about this. There are slight differences between operational roles, and title to me isn't really important. What's most important is that you know what you need from your person, or you know what the business needs, and you hire the person that can deliver that. We have what we call a spectrum, the integrator spectrum, and on one end of the spectrum is your more tactical, operational doer person, and on the other end of the spectrum is more of a strategic partner who can basically read your mind and is always one step ahead of you and is helping you more along the lines of making decisions about what your next best step is. And so the director of operations kind of falls somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. And the integrator is your true integrator is going to be more on the strategic end of that spectrum.
Mm. I am curious how you can provide this as a service coming into a business. I mean, similar for a fractional CFO, I'm sure, but coming into a business and, having to learn everything about the business and then providing that like really high level advisory, um, and also gaining the trust of the client enough to know that like if you are the number two, to be able to be like really, I imagine it's a pretty high touch service. I don't know. Can you explain the service a little bit, like what it actually looks like for your clients?
Yes. Well, I feel like there was two questions there.
Yeah,
So
there was probably a stream of questions that I didn't fully formulate.
that's fine. I'm gonna try to answer both of them like quickly. So the first question is how do we come in and do that? And
Yeah.
I hope I'm not like offending anybody here, but with a brain that thinks like mine, all businesses are the same.
Mm,
You might think your business is different because you're in a different industry or you've got a different business model, but the basic functions of a business are the same. And that's what a second in command is really good at. That's what makes us integrators is that we know how businesses function and operate. We know those it's going to, how it happens, business to business is going to change, but the basic functions are the same. So all you really have to do, it's a plug and play model. So
mm,
you just have to fill in the blanks and that makes it much easier. So for us integrators, everything is a system and you just plug in the new components into your system and you're up and running. And so that's how we do that.
mm,
Um, and then as far as like what it looks like to serve someone, especially as a fractional second into command, that's really interesting because it's such a important level, like an executive position in your company, very similar to the fractional CFO. So how are we able to do that with just a few hours a week? And that's how we do it is we take our systems and we're implementing systems in the business and systems when I'm talking about systems, I'm not talking about like your standard operating procedures. I'm talking about how do you think? How do you function? How do you operate? What is the cogs in the wheel that make things turn? We define those and systematize those. And we do that through managing your people. One of the main things we do is accountability. And we do it a little bit different than a lot of people in that we help your leadership team, we help your staff, the people you hire understand their purpose in the business. Not
mm,
just here are the tasks that we're hiring you to do. We want you to think for yourself. We want you to be able to make decisions. We want you to be able to operate a little bit more autonomously without us having to always tell you what to do. And so we create that accountability. So that's really your business functioning on its own without you. And that's one of the main tools that we use to kind of, come in and set up that structure in your business. So we do that through meetings, we do that through metrics, we do that through communication, and we do it through planning. So, yeah.
Yeah.
that now that I say it, I'm like, wow, that sounds really simple.
No, you just simplified it because that's what you're good at. Is making
Yeah.
things
Well, I think the hard part though
streamlined.
is it isn't hard. I mean,
Yeah.
I say this a lot about the things I do. The things I do aren't hard. It's the time. And that's really what is important to remember in your business is where you're spending your time and spending it wisely. And if there's somebody that you can bring in that can focus on a certain aspect and spend their time on a certain aspect, um, that's what's really important. It's not like a lot of times it's not about the skill. It's just
Yeah.
about the time and the focus.
Well, yes and no, because I
True.
think you also have a gifting in that feeling very simple to you.
Yes.
In like how you're wired and, the experiences that you've had in life to bring you to that point. So I always want to be like, wait a second, like it might be easier for you than it is for other people, which is why they hire it out, which I think is great. Like I am definitely more of the, like the visionary CEO, where, that's really easy for me to think in really big picture. But when it comes to really developing the structure and, executing. Obviously, I've been able to execute to a certain point because I have a business, but that's not a strength of mine. So that is something that like we're looking at in the next like year or two to start like figuring out who can be that role in our business. But yeah, it doesn't come natural to a lot of people, and so then hiring it out, I think it's fantastic that there's like this ability if it really doesn't work for you, like to do this yourself or you don't have the skill set in-house that you can bring in this fractional role. Um, when are you seeing businesses get to the place that they need an integrator or somebody to really focus on operations in their business?
Well, so at the integrator level, that for what I do, it's not really about revenue. I know a lot of people like to put a revenue number on it, and I can do that for you. But really, what you're looking at is do you have a leadership team?
Mhm.
So, what a leadership team is do you have folks in your business where you are trusting them with certain functions of the business. So it's not that you're directing every little task that they do, but you're giving them decision making capabilities and you're giving them some ownership over certain functions of your business. Because at that point, what you're doing is you're doing what you do to run the business, but then you're also managing a lot of people and you're wearing too many hats.
Mhm.
And at that point, we're going to assume that your business is growing enough that your role needs to be at that point what you do, Hannah, which is looking out towards the future. So somebody needs to be steering the ship because markets are going to change, the industry is going to change, your customers' needs are going to change, and if nobody is watching over that, you're going to become irrelevant or stagnant or you're going to start going downhill. So the integrator is brought in so that we can do all those operational functions of executing the business plan, managing your people, hiring and terminating and all of that, while you are able to focus on key relationships in your industry that are going to advance you. You're researching the market and industry trends, and you're thinking about like, how are we going to stay relevant? What is the next big thing?
Mm. Yeah, that's the part I like. Are there leadership teams that would be considered too small, or is there a certain number of people that you kind of look for to be like, yeah, this is what I can work with?
Well, we have worked with teams of all sizes, and we have clients who do not technically have a leadership team, and we can support them. And those clients are apparently finding value in what we do because they've been with us for months. But in terms of where you can get the most value, we're really looking at least two people on the leadership team. Three is our sweet spot. Sometimes that leadership team can include a fractional person, like a fractional CFO. So a lot of our clients have fractional HR, fractional CFO, fractional legal, um, and those do count as leadership team members, but at least one or two is probably the minimum. And we do run some people's staffs that are not leadership team, but you would probably be more served to move into more of a like director of operations type person, who's more focused on task level execution than strategy level execution.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And the fractional thing can work as part of your leadership team. We have been able to do that with clients who are implementing like EOS, for example, and they're doing these like level 10 meetings that are very regular weekly meetings. We actually sit in for some of our clients. We can sit in on those level 10 meetings, which has been an interesting way to be able to provide the CFO service, but it gives like a really incredible insight from our CFO to be able to have that information for all the stuff that's happening in the business. So, it's proven to be a very good way to stay very connected with how the business is going, and then it's nice to have the finance hat in the room for that. So I like that. Okay, I would like to ask you a little bit more about your business model and how you've changed over the years. Because when you first started out, it was just you, correct? Like
Yeah.
just providing services, figuring it out. But you've started to shift into becoming an agency. Can you explain your definition of what an agency is or what an agency model is?
For me, the agency is that my staff provides a service and we are all providing the same service. So everyone on my staff is going to go into a client. Now, we are all going to have our different um, past experiences and perspectives, and um, his our skills are different. Like some of us have a marketing background, some of us have a finance background, some of us have an HR background. But in the end, what we're doing and what we're implementing for clients is the same. We use the same tools, we use the same processes. And so to me, that's an agency when someone comes to the company, to the business, to C-suite boutique and says, I need this. And I'm saying, let's match you with, based on your industry and what you're needing most, let's match you with the person who's going to be the best fit for you. And then uh, the business keeps a portion of the revenue from that client and pays the rest of it out to the provider. So to me, that's an agency.
Yeah. I I I know sometimes people are like, "Well, what is an agency and how am I an agency?" I don't know. I think usually if you have other people providing the service, that you're trying to standardize in some kind of way. That's what I'm
Yeah.
hearing, or the commonality. So, Clara CFO would be considered an agency in that, as well. And that poses challenges, especially when you are the person and the face of
Hmm.
people and or the face of the business, and then people have been working with you. And also like if you've been working with people where maybe you have a long lifetime value or a lifetime service term with some clients, it can be very difficult to start to move into that agency
Yes.
model. So, can we talk a little bit about like maybe like the struggle there? And because I think we've both gone through that in some ways. And I think we could commiserate a little bit. I'm sure there's other people who are listening to the podcast who are trying to figure that out, or maybe they're in the struggle as well. What have you found has been some of the biggest challenges there?
Um, two, maybe three. The third one might come to me as I'm talking, but the first challenge was for me, it was compensation. So, quality of service is really important to me. And we talked about that spectrum, right? And so I wanted to be sure that the experience clients were having with anyone I hired was going to be on that the one end of the spectrum where it was a little bit more strategic. And so I knew that in order to find someone with that skill set, they were going to want to be compensated. And of course, I want to compensate them, their experience and their level of skill deserves that.
Right.
But then at the same time, the business has to profit or we can't keep the doors open. And so finding the balance between compensating somebody what they are worth and also making it a profitable situation for the company was a little bit of challenge, was a little challenging. And to be honest with you, I'm still experimenting with that right balance.
Mhm.
My first foray was not good. So I ended up overcompensating someone. And um, so the next time around, we're trying a different compensation structure and we're going to see if that works a little bit better.
Mm.
So compensation was difficult. And I will mention too that a lot of the clients that I support have a similar business model. I wouldn't call them an agency, but they are service providers whose services involve paying out other people. So
Mhm.
um, I fortunately have a lot of visibility into how that works and what is required. So let's say you're a finance person, so I feel very intimidated talking about this with you. But you have your revenue that you bring in, and there's like for almost any industry, there's the sweet spot of how much you can afford to pay out
Yeah.
to your staff, and then money that you have left over to pay your expenses. So we've kind of nailed that down. So just having worked with those businesses as my clients, I had some visibility into that for making decisions for myself and my business. So I'm kind of trying to stay within that window of margin, I guess you could call it. Um, and and that's working better for me than my original, which is like, I'm going to pay you 90%. I'm just
Oh,
going to tell you right now,
yeah.
don't do that.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Don't do that. And then the second challenge I would say is deciding when it makes sense to start the agency because um, you're going to go from keeping all of the money that's coming into the business because you're working directly with those clients to taking some of the revenue and paying somebody else. And you're not going to be able to serve the same number of clients that you've served in the past and manage your staff, right?
Yeah.
So finding that, like figuring out how to transition from making money through serving clients to making money through billing out staff.
Yeah.
So I don't have the answer for that. If you've got a good financial person, they can help you kind of prepare for that, I guess, because you're going to probably want to have some money in the bank in case there's a lapse in revenue that you're making. But that was a challenge for me. And I am not a risk taker. And so ultimately it was kind of one of those things where I just said, I've got to do it and I've got to do it scared. So here
Mhm.
we are.
Yeah. Well, and it's working out. So sometimes taking those big leaps is just what you need to shake things up. But doing it with planning and consideration and thoughtfulness in those decisions, I I have a lot of very relevant experience in this because it all just happened in 2022 for me. I started to take on other CFOs who were able to start serving clients. I started with a salary model of a very high paid person that was absolutely 100% worth it, 1,000 times over. It was scary, but it was moving clients that I had been serving over to this new person. So there was also the personnel, it's kind of the interrelational aspect of that needed to be managed.
Mm-hmm.
And then also there were many people who were on lower tiered pricing than really what they should be in order to actually pay somebody else to do the work because I was working with people for so long. It was really hard to raise their rates, especially through COVID. A number of things kept their rates low. So it was a lot of planning and a lot of strategic moves with certain clients to get that person to a place where they were at least breaking even
Right.
on their salary. So I focused on break even first and
Hmm.
then worked on profit second. So that was kind of my big thing because I knew I had to. I knew I would kind of go into a little bit of a loss position for a little bit. So I agree with your thought of like if you're a solo person banking some money to think about, okay, how many months do I really have where I could maybe be either break even or maybe a little bit of a loss in order to get to that next level can be helpful. So I love all those things because it's really practical. I want to go back a little bit to your thoughts on the margin because I think this is really practical information that people need to know about. What do you guys have like a percentage now that you or percentage ranges that you try to say like, hey, if revenue comes in, we pay out 50% to the service provider and 50% goes to the agency. Do you have any hard percentages you like to go by?
Yeah. So it depends. It probably depends on your industry.
Yeah.
So within the industries I serve, I know that it can range anywhere from 40 to 60% that you need
Mhm.
to keep in the business. And a lot of that's going to depend on if you have, like, for example, some of us are going to have higher overhead in terms of if you have real estate or if you have special licensures or insurances that you're required to carry. Um, so for us, my so for anyone listening, our rates are pretty affordable. I've done a lot of research into what other fractional integrators are charging, and one of my values is accessibility, and so we try to keep our rates as affordable as possible. And so my margins have to be slimmer. And so we're paying out, we're starting our staff at, we pay them, we keep the business. Let's be clear, like the money does not come to me, it goes
Yeah.
to the business.
Right.
So the business keeps 40%, and the 40% covers all of our software. It covers any sort of time that I'm spending perfecting tools and creating systems. It covers our admin staff. It covers marketing, covers all of that.
Hmm.
So we pay out 60%. But one of the things that we have done, and I'm experimenting with this, and I'll maybe check in with you in a year and let you know if it's working, is a graduated model where if it's performance based. So if you're retaining clients for a long period of time, you're going to keep a higher percentage because it costs the business less to maintain a client for at the 12-month period than it does to bring them on in the first 6 months. And also, it's telling us that if those clients are staying with you, you're doing a really good job, and we want to compensate you for that. So, we're going to try this graduated model where you can keep larger percentages for performance.
Hmm.
And the real estate market is very similar to that. And that's kind of where I picked that up, is when I was an agent at a real estate company for a very hot minute. They did the same thing. Like after you hit a certain sales number, you could keep more of your income
Hmm.
because you're performing. So we'll try
Yeah. Yeah.
that.
That's interesting. You would probably hit a ceiling. You couldn't go too high on some of
Right.
that, but yeah, that's an interesting concept. I've also thought about that with maybe like performance bonuses based on
Yep.
retention.
Yep.
That's another thing for anybody who's on that retainer model where you get paid every month from a client, and the longer they stay on, the better it is for the business. I think that incentivizing the longevity is helpful for sure. Um, okay. Can we talk a little bit about, I guess, get a little personal? um, because I think you and I are both in a boat of being a single parent and running a business that is thriving and keeping you very busy
Hmm.
and doing
Right.
so I would love to hear, how are you managing entrepreneurship and single parenthood?
Am I? Am I managing?
You are. I know you are.
Some days it does not feel like it. It's been a lot of getting used to because in a dual parent household, um, first of all, I didn't have to earn as much money because the bills were shared. So I wasn't like, it was less important how many clients that I kept on. So that's been a huge change for me is I've doubled my client load, which means I'm working a lot more and that time has to come from somewhere. And so some of the things that I've had to do is outsource. So I'm outsourcing a lot of my home stuff, which I felt incredible guilt about in the beginning. But when I think about it, it's just stuff that even if I wanted to, I wouldn't have time. So, like laundry, cleaning, errands, things like that. I have somebody now to help me with that. And it buys me a ton of time. I have systems at home that might surprise you. So they don't always work incredibly well because I have young kids, but I have systems for them to help step in and do things as well. That buys me time. But and this is not going to sound glamorous, but I have to do a lot of my work at night because
Yeah.
um, I get up in the morning, I do the kid thing, and then in the afternoon, I do the kid thing. And there's hours in between that I'm working on client work, but then my own business needs support too. And so a lot of times, um, I'm doing that at night. Not ideal, but it's quiet and it's uninterrupted, and there's no dinging and texting and slacking and whatever. And I can actually get a lot done in an hour or two at night, uninterrupted. Uh, More so than if I spent that same 2 hours during the day, I'd probably get very distracted.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if that's managing, that's what I'm doing. And I mean, I'm going to be honest. Are there things that I wish were better? Yes.
Yeah.
I wish I had more time to spend with my kids. That was the biggest transition for me is I had so much time to do the afternoon school events and like all of these extra things with my kids, and I've had to give them up a little bit. And so the challenge for me is finding ways to maintain some of that and balance it, but just it looks different and there's not as much of it. So we just have to be more intentional with the time we do have um, together and finding creative ways to fit that in.
Yeah. Because everything changes. I mean, it 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 changes when you don't have your kids all the time, or and then I noticed that the pressure and the guilt factor, not from my child, but just from myself
Hmm.
on, when they are home, to be like all in,
Yep.
present, very, very available.
Yes.
Where I would normally, my daughter comes home at 3 o'clock. At 3 o'clock, I want to be not working,
Right.
so that, maybe she's doing whatever, but like I want to be there and like, not be working. So my work day compressed from
Yes.
basically 8 to 3,
Uh-huh.
school hours. And so then I would do that evening work hours as well. So one of my goals for this year, though, I'm a few more years into my single parenting, than but my goal is actually to not work in the evening, to
Yep.
get my workday done in that school hours, and so
Yes.
that's kind of the dream.
Right.
I
Yes.
think, there's transitions and there's times, and, kids needing things at different ages, there's going to be seasons, of this, and I think that we're all just trying to figure out what works for the time, and then it might be different the next year or the next even like literal season from spring to
Yes.
fall or to summer, it's all different. So,
It is. Um, and looking back at what I was said earlier about accountability, and then you had made a comment about skill set, like things that come easy to me that don't come easy to you, things I take for granted, to be honest. But that's another thing that that I do and my staff does. So if we're talking about in the business and in the home, I outsource in the home, but then it also becomes really important to surround yourself in your business with the right people. So this is one of my soapboxes because my whole podcast and what I do, Female Founders Breaking Boundaries, I created because we run as moms by a different set of rules. And a lot of that comes from our diminished time.
Yeah.
And so if you have diminished time, it becomes much more important to make sure that you're able to get more done more efficiently or in less amount of time. And part of that is putting somebody or outsourcing to somebody who is just going to hammer stuff out for you and
Yes.
take things off your plate. And so what we've found is there's a difference between offloading tasks and offloading ownership. Because when you offload ownership, you are offloading the mental load, you are offloading the thought process, you are offloading the monitoring of all of the stuff. Whereas if you're delegating tasks, you're still thinking about those tasks, overseeing those tasks, and following up on those tasks. And so hiring the right people becomes really important in our situation to make sure we can get more done in less time.
Mm, that is so good. I've never really thought about that, like the ownership piece of just the mental load of something, because that's what we're carrying all the time. Is to even just that, oh, did that payroll get run? Did that thing happen? Did that client get what they needed? Oh, all those little thoughts that just weigh on you and will
Yep.
keep you up at night. Um, that is huge. Do you have any tips for hiring people who can take ownership?
I do. I mean, it's a process, but just in, of course, me in its simplest form, there's a couple of main things that we help people think about differently when they're hiring. And the first is um, understand the purpose. So we can list off a bucket of tasks, right, that we need to get off of our plate. But when you're hiring somebody, not only do you need to know why am I hiring this person? What value are they going to provide to the business? But they have to know that as well. And then you have to so once you understand what that value is, you have to know how that value shows up in the business. So you have to find some way of tracking whether that's working or not. So that's the number one thing. And then number two, when we're doing hiring, yes, skills are important because somebody who's a good skill set fit is going to be able to hit the ground running and be really good at what they do. But we also look a lot more at like just our innate the ways we function. So for example, if you're hiring an executive assistant, for example, somebody who says I'm a taskmaster, yes, that's important, but we also need somebody who's got just they're born this way, right? They're born to organize. They're born to look ahead at what's coming and be able to predict things. They are motivated. They are self-sustaining. Like all of these things are not skills, they're qualities or traits. And then you have to through that interview process, you have to be able to tease those out because you can't teach those things.
Right.
They just happen. Skills can be learned and tuned and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
those are the two things we do a little bit differently to make sure that we're bringing on the right people.
Yeah, that's great. Um, I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about your business and what matters to you from a financial perspective. Do you have any metrics that you really care about or track in your business?
I do. And it's going to be, I'm a little intimidated talking to a finance
Don't be
expert, but
intimidated. All answers are good answers.
so so I'm a fact finder for those of you who aren't familiar with the Colby. I I just I absorb information. I don't make quick decisions. I overanalyze everything. So for me, I have two financial things that drive me financially. The first is I want to keep a certain standard of living for me and my kids. And so my financial goals are going to be tied to what that looks like and what that means. And then the second thing is retirement. Like I don't like to stress and worry about things. And so I want to make sure that I'm putting away enough money that if something goes wrong, like my boiler goes out, for example, true
Mm,
story,
mm.
I am not freaking out about now what am I going to do? Where am I going to get the money for this? And so all my financial decisions kind of revolve around those things. And it changes and fluctuates depending on what's happening in my life and what's happening in the business. But I try to look ahead and anticipate what my expenses are going to be. And honestly, when I started doing some of these things the way I'm doing them, making the money actually became easier
Yeah.
because I it became like, well, you need this amount of money. Where are you going to get it? And that's a lot a lot different way of looking at things. Like your body functions and reacts differently when you look at it that way. It becomes a lot easier to
Yeah.
go out and um pound the pavement and make connections and talk about how you can serve people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it becomes just so much more real when you understand I really do need this amount of money personally to from this business has to provide X number of dollars for me. To get really clear on that is so helpful. So many business owners like start a business and then the personal income is kind of the afterthought, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna take home some money from it. But if you kind of reverse engineer it a little bit and you say, I have to make, maybe it's, $15,000 a month for the business. Maybe it's 20,000, maybe it's 25. I don't know. Maybe you need more than that. But sometimes it's just like, I need $5,000 a month. And that's, what I need. If you can reverse engineer to figure out, what you need to be making revenue wise in order to get to that, be able to take your distributions or your paycheck or whatever it is. A lot of people don't do that work of really understanding their personal budgets.
Yes.
And if you don't do that, that can create a lot of financial turmoil. So
Yep.
I highly recommend people to be doing that. And I'm probably going to have a YouTube video on that very soon because it is something I am quite passionate about. So I
Let me
love that.
know when you do that because I will. So, for the way we work with our clients, there's a tiny little bit of overlap between what a fractional CFO does and what we do. And it's okay. I think because where we overlap is so important.
Yeah.
And one of those areas is that we want our clients to get what they need from their business. So, if they have a CFO or a fractional CFO, we're pushing them to work with you to make sure that they're paying themselves first.
Yeah.
And then if they don't have someone like you, we're asking those questions like what do you have to get from this? Because you can't keep losing money every month.
Hmm.
And we have to know what you need so we can work backwards from that and design the business around what you need. So whether it's managing expenses or increasing revenue or, moving some things around, I think that's really important. And a lot of business owners, like you said, are afraid to make money or they feel guilty for making money or they just don't know.
Yeah.
They haven't thought about it.
Yeah. Or they've been told that they should be the last person to pay themselves because they're the business owner and they're trying to like build it all up. So they keep themselves at a very low, unreasonable salary. It's just not reasonable. It's just not reasonable to pay yourself like super low, especially when you're taking on all the risk of growing the
Yep.
business. And it just, yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So, yes, I definitely will let you know about that. um, so I know that we're coming up on our time here and I feel like I have a lot more questions for you. What has been maybe the best piece of financial advice you've gotten in your entrepreneurial journey?
Well, I don't know. There's so much like So much of what I do revolves around finances, which is why CFOs are my best friend because it's so important. Um, but I think the best piece of financial advice I got actually before I started. So when I went into business, I was able to avoid some of the mistakes that a lot of other people make. And that was to pay myself first. And by pay myself first, I want to be clear that that doesn't just include what I pay my bills with. I really sat down and I thought about, what do I need to pay my bills? What do I need to put into retirement? What do I need to sock away for unexpected health expenses? What do I need for fund money? I put it all in the bucket, and that's what I pay myself. It's not just what goes into the bank account to pay the bills. And I had to work backwards from that. So
Mhm. That's good. Yeah, I definitely. What do you need? Like everything you need for home, for life.
yes.
That's what we talk about when we want to cover everything,
Yep.
in that. So I love that. Well, Casey, I have one last question for you, but before I ask it, I want to point people to your website. And so that's c-suiteboutique.com. People can go and check you out there. But I'm curious, what is your favorite podcast to listen to right now? And it can either be work or fun.
Okay, so I I have overdosed on work related podcasts over the years. There is so many great ones out there, honestly. And I have a little bit of a dark side. So I'm going to give you my personal favorite
Yes.
podcast. And it's actually starring Rainn Wilson. So if you're an
Oh, yeah.
Office fan,
Yeah.
he's the main character of the podcast, and it's called Radio Rental. And it's basically them telling like they're suspiciously supernatural. So it's real stories of weird, strange things that have happened to people, and it's just
Oh,
interesting to some of them are probably not true at all, and some of them are, and it just kind of like gives my heebie-jeebies, makes my skin or my hair stand up on my arm when I listen to it. So it's a Radio Rental.
radio rental. Okay. I love it. There's so many amazing podcasts out there. And so like, I like to hear the fun ones too. So love
Yes.
that. Well, Casey, thank you so much for being on Financial Clarity. I appreciate your vulnerability, your openness to talking about life and business and how they're so intertwined too. They
Yes.
are in this entrepreneurial life. So, so people can go check out Female Founders Breaking Boundaries, check out the podcast. How else can people get connected with you?
I'm actually very active on LinkedIn. So I would love for you to find me on LinkedIn and connect with me. And just so you know, the way I use LinkedIn is I don't really talk about my work a lot out there. I use LinkedIn to develop my network so that if you and I ever find a time in our future that we could benefit from knowing each other, that's what I do on LinkedIn is I just want to create relationships. So come find me because I post a lot of interesting things that you can react to.
Yes, I love it. Casey, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was so fun.
So fun. All right. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Financial Clarity Podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes to learn more about today's episode and click subscribe on your favorite podcast app.